Hey now.
Well, hello there.
Hey now. Hey now.
Fafafui. Are we going to get demonetized for that?
Yeah, I know. If we say that shit, we're going to get in so much trouble.
I think we're already in trouble at this point.
Okay.
You can't say "hey now" with bass in your voice, or
yeah,
Stern will come knocking.
Yeah.
But he's a nice guy now. He's all mellowed out. He wrote a new book, and he has daughters.
It's like a gentrified Stern. He likes to interview people now and actually talk to them, not ask them about like their first time with their wife or their first time ever, or how it was to bang Sarah Jessica Parker, or the stuff that we all kind of wanted to know now doesn't get talked about.
He actually likes to be interviewed now.
Yeah,
which is weird.
I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of gentrified Stern. I feel like you reached the pinnacle and now you're not entertaining to me. Because, I mean, really what was entertaining to me was him breaking the edge, or pushing the edge and sort of like, breaking the rules.
Right. But now he's just showing himself to be like the nice guy he's always been.
Yeah.
But that's not entertaining. Nice Howard Stern, get out of here.
Well, it's just like at the end of interviewing, a celebrity who's pretty hot, you should ask them if they want to sit on the Sibian, and then say, Jenny McCarthy did it, and then ask them if they want to sit in the tickle chair if they refuse the Sibian. I mean, these things are just customary ways of, keeping guests happy and stimulated throughout the interview.
Right, and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like it's both. It's like happy and stimulated and uncomfortable. That was the magic that he would bring.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so rest in peace, Howard Stern. He's not dead, though, but he's dead to me.
Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about today is more about the ongoing, struggle or fight against the troubled teen industry that seems to be moving forward, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, this is a common thing over the years that there's these glimmers of hope that things might change, and then they don't, and new facilities pop up and states, and but before we get into kind of some of the details about what's going on, for people who don't know, because there still are a lot of people who don't even understand what that is, the troubled teen industry. I thought we'd go through kind of some information about what it is. So I came across an article, partially written by a girl who is explaining what happened when she was 14 years old. So she lived with her grandparents in a wealthy gated community, went to a private school, and suddenly she found she had access to the internet, and it changed her life. Her world opened up, and she discovered heavy metal music, and she started learning the guitar.
Yeah.
And her ambition, she says, went from to become a judge like her grandfather to becoming a rock star, which is pretty cool. Like, that seems like a reasonable aspiration for a 14-year-old girl who's just discovered the world, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And that was it. Like, that's the thing. She discovered metal, and her wealthy grandparents said, "Oh no." So her grandparents decided that the best way to reverse that trend was to, quote, ship my ass off to a camp for troubled teens in Montana. And in her experience, she learned some, quote, terrifying truths about an industry dedicated to taking America's at-risk youth, and I think we're beyond our 30-second limit, and fucking them up in the worst way possible. So she kind of details some things about how it works. So for those that don't understand what the troubled teen industry is, this kind of breaks down a few things about how they operate. So, number 6, your parents can hire people to take you away, or in this case, your grandparents. So, she goes on to say that one night in August 2004, she awoke to a man and a woman in her room whom she had never seen before, telling her that they were her escorts, and they're going to a place called Wilderness. Right? Just like in the middle of the night. So she was not allowed to bring any belongings or tell anyone where she was going. And of course she didn't know what escorts in Wilderness meant, and was rightfully terrified. She said it was like being at least Liam Neeson's daughter in Taken, if it had turned out that later that Liam Neeson had arranged the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so she basically was, legally kidnapped. So she was driven to an airport where they got on a plane to Idaho, and I guess she was in Montana, I think. I don't know. Anyway, she ended up in Idaho, and she says she didn't try to run. And running wouldn't have done her much good, because later she learned that kids who resist have been pepper sprayed and hogtied. And as a reminder, these are supposed to be children who are suffering some kind of trouble. So right off the bat, it doesn't seem like something you should be doing to a kid who has issues, so to speak, right?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Okay, so, and then she goes on to explain that the actual taking and transporting kids destined for programs like the one she was headed to is handled by companies like one called the Center for Safe Youth, which actually emphasizes the element of surprise on their FAQ page. So she goes and looks at the page from Center for Safe Youth, which is a fantastic name. I mean, it sounds like so great. Right? So the question is, should I tell my child in advance, even the night before? And their answer is no. Prior knowledge will only serve to increase the child's anxiety, heighten defenses, and force the child into a bad decision, such as running away. So they want this to be secret. They want it to be sudden. And it's that's just horrible. Like, in almost any other case, you think that something this big of a change in someone's life, you'd want to give them some fair warning about what's going to happen next, or even, God forbid, include the child on the decision making.
Yeah.
So, but no, they don't want to do that.
It's a horrendous way to start off, like some type of healing process or some type of, rebuilding of a team. It's a horrendously inappropriate and, frankly, damaging way to start off. And so
far we're just talking about the transportation. We're not even there yet.
Yeah, we're not talking about anything else. And, the fact that these people are so cold and they give so little information, and that you're warned off the bat that, they'll hog-tie you and pepper spray you. That's you're creating what you're doing is wrong. Like, and if you can't see that, then you're crazy.
Right, that's just wrong. Like And
there's nothing about that is therapeutic or beneficial for the teen at all.
Right. So what leads a teen to be put in this position? And Tori Jane is the name of the author here. This former 14-year-old who I suppose is now in her 20s. So she says, so what kind of crime does a kid have to commit to wind up subjected to this?
Yeah.
And the answer is anything. Kids can be sent away for drug use, depression, eating disorders, really any behavioral issue you can dream up. Some were sent away for bad grades, or for not following the family religion, or for being gay. It's an industry that survives on parents' fear that their kid is quote unquote at risk. So it's anything. In fact, there was a school in Georgia that I was looking at a few months ago, and their main criteria for wanting parents to send them there was boredom. If your kid is showing signs of boredom, send them to us, and we will revitalize them in some way by keeping them isolated in the wilderness without access to. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to just state that when I got a chance to ask others who were captive with me in Heritage and Devereaux why you were here, a good majority of them really didn't have an answer for it and didn't know. So this secrecy and this kind of like communication between parent and program as to reasoning is normally kept from the child the entire time. That can go on for years. That can go on for years and years. You are gaslit. You are gaslit to the T from day one.
Yeah, I think in her case, she had no clue. And it turns out that it's because she was into, youth culture and normal stuff. It wasn't, there wasn't any, real bad behavior whatsoever. It was just, we don't like the direction that you're going in. We've got the money to be able to ship you away, so therefore we're going to do this in private and have people show up and take you away.
Yeah.
So, and she goes on, this is number 5, your parents give you up to a private company, and that's a crazy thought. And she says, at this point, you're probably wondering, how could this possibly be legal? Couldn't any sufficiently rambunctious kid just flip out when he and his escorts get to a public place and trust the police to take care of the rest? Nope. As much as it looks and feels like a kidnapping, those escorts have the absolute legal right to transport you against your will, even if that means carrying you through the street, handcuffed to hell and back. There is a legal process where parents can sign over custody of kids who need residential care. Need being a very ambiguous word. So she says it makes sense because if a kid is to be housed in a mental health facility, staff needs to be able to make all of the day-to-day decisions for her care, but that same process works for unruly teens like me, which meant that the company that ran my camp had total legal control over where I went and what I did. This girl in particular didn't have any clear, mental health issues. She wasn't depressed. She wasn't bipolar. She wasn't sleeping around. It wasn't that kind of situation. We'll get into why even those kinds of situations is not appropriate, but she says even phone calls to her grandparents were a privilege she had to earn. She was allowed 5 minutes, and a staff member sat next to me the entire time listening in. If during the call I complained about being unhappy, that was called manipulative behavior, and they'd end the call. They'd read letters from her grandparents to her, word for word, and packages my friend sent were destroyed right in front of me because ... tough love. So they have total control over everything about the kid. Basically, the parental rights are signed away, and there's nothing anybody can really do about it.
And really, that's where trauma really sets in. You know, is when you start to act because it's normal, and then you're punished, and this control is just so overwhelming and so almighty that you have no recourse and no say, you know. And you know, I often think about this, like, if a parent is willing to do this, they might as well be willing to let their kid run away. Because
sure. Now, in some cases, I mean, this is one of those like tricky situations or questions because of the absolute control they have over the child's environment and the editing and proofreading and destruction of information and material sent back and forth. Is it possible that in some cases, at least, that the parents aren't getting the full story and are just unaware of what's really going on?
Always. But that's from day one, from the first phone call where the salespeople are selling this to the parent. That is what's going on.
Right.
You know, they're being lied to. They're being given a fluffy painted picture of actually what is going to happen to your child on a day-to-day basis. And really, they don't even know what's going on with your child on a day-to-day basis, the salespeople. They're not on the unit all day with the child. They don't see what the staff do. They don't see what goes on.
Right. They're probably not there hardly at all, if ever.
I mean, I think
the people who are actually selling it.
No, I think sometimes they are. I mean, I think that there is definitely a thing with WASP where, you know, there's a starting point base where all the sales stuff is done, and then there are other programs in other locations that the kids get sent to. But I don't know. I remember talking to a salesperson from Cross Creek in a setup call with two other girls, survivors. And we talked about sending our child to this place, and she was sort of like saying how her child is, you know, she would send her child to this place, and how, you know, her child does all the seminars and everything, and, you know, she made it just seem so normal and fluffy.
Right. Wow. So total control, and the next problem is a big one, and it's number 4, and it's that kids die in their care.
Yeah.
So, Tori had been sent to what they call a wilderness program. And they continue to be very popular, which attempts to solve behavioral problems via the time-honored educational tradition of hiking. It's just absurd to even read that. It didn't matter your age or gender or physical ability. We were all lumped in together. And she goes on to talk about what it was like. That summer, the heat was sweltering, and the packs were about a third of my 14-year-old body weight. So these are like, you know, 30, 40-pound backpacks. This wasn't like a camp out where you'd hike 5 or 10 miles to a campground or canoe along a river for 2 or 3 days. We were out there for weeks, and the adults responsible for us weren't exactly competent woodsmen. A girl in my group had to wrap fresh gauze and bandages across a 3rd-degree burn on her arm every morning because she had passed out on the rocks in the hot summer sun. Her counselors thought she was faking and decided that the safest course of action was to leave her there. She was later rushed to the hospital and had to get skin grafts. Still, at least neither of us died, as happens with some regularity. because of untrained staff and lack of adequate nourishment, that being the leading cause of death. Go ahead.
That's incredibly traumatic as well. I mean, I remember stuff like that. It's like, you know, I'm pretty much legally blind without glasses, and my glasses got broken when I got attacked by a kid, and I didn't have glasses for 4 weeks, and it's because of the incompetence of sort of the medical staff and the staff to, like, communicate, okay, well, he's on unit all day, not able to see. Can we get something done? Can you please call to get an appointment? You know? Like that, and me not being able to talk, you know, and just not being able to say. And, like, the levels of fear when you're kind of in a situation where if you get hurt like that, you know that you're going to be called a fake and that now it's your fault, so you've got to take care of it. And, like, I mean, it's just so traumatic. It's awful.
Right. So you think, like, okay, so if this had happened at, like, a Boy Scout camp, it would be all over the news. Like, if some kids were getting, like, third-degree burns out camping with the Boy Scouts, it would be ridiculous. In fact, there was a factory fire, a Girl Scout cookie factory fire in 2009 that got major headlines because it's a big deal, you know. It's like, that's not troubled teen. That's adventure fun camp. That's learning how to be a responsible kid. That's learning how to camp. Like, in reality, I mean, they have issues of their own, but the general premise of something like the Scouts is not punishment for kids who are told they have problems. So there's a difference. And the reason this stuff happens is the subject of the third point she makes is that there's literally no regulation.
Right.
And if she goes on to say, if you spend time studying these programs, you'll notice they all tend to be located in states like Utah and Montana, and that's because those states don't have regulations for how these programs are required to treat their kids.
Right.
It's a multi-million-dollar industry with tens of thousands of American teens being herded through these programs like cattle. Montana is one of the last states in the country with actually zero oversight, and that may be changing, but we'll get to that in a bit. So they're called schools, and they run off private funding, and they don't accept government aid. Because that's the case, the government is not required to intervene. It also means that the government isn't allowed to, quote, give two shits that the people taking care of the children have police records or simply no credentials. And it's not cheap. It's very expensive. Teen treatment facilities are the flip side of the quote-unquote rich kid coin. It's nice that your parents can afford to pay for college, but they can also afford to pay $10,000 a month to mold their imperfect 14-year-old into the center daughter they've always wanted. And that's kind of what the sales pitch is that, look, you got the money, we have the resources and skills to make your kid the kid that you always dreamed of. So this has been going on for a long time. There was a journalist named Maya Slavovitz. She published an expose called Help at Any Cost. That prompted a congressional inquiry in 2006. The Government Accountability Office investigated and found that thousands of cases of abuse and at least 10 deaths between 1990 and 2004. Congress did propose a bill to regulate but not ban these facilities, and that bill died in committee. They proposed it again, and over again through the years, this stuff is brought up, and then it dies in committee and doesn't get voted on. it's just not, there doesn't seem to be any momentum behind anyone really doing anything on a government level about this, even though they know about it.
Yeah, well, we don't have lobbyists, man. You know?
Right. When's the last time a troubled teen ever donated a bunch of cash to a political campaign?
Right.
You know, like there's no voice there. There's even advocacy groups are so tiny compared to the wealth and power of the facilities themselves because they're privately funded and they're very expensive and they have a lot of cash on hand and they can essentially buy off politicians because they're not taking any money from the government, you know.
They have firms that they have their own lawyer firms. They have, they have their own way of writing laws, you know, and making things okay in the town that they're doing the things in. You know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, these are all internal suggestions and guidelines, really, is kind of what it comes down to. The regulatory bodies that aren't really regulatory bodies that are staffed by the owners and executives of the very facilities that they're supposed to be looking after. Like that has something to do with the newer news regarding Montana that we'll get to. Okay, so she goes on to point number 2. That the treatment methods are insane and ineffective. So, since they don't have any standards to abide by, our counselors were free to go with whatever quote-unquote treatment sounded like it might work. She says once they took all the girls who had eating disorders and made them eat dinner in front of the boys without using their hands or any utensils, for instance. They would make kids role-play characters from memories of rape and abuse, forcing them to relive childhood horrors. Complaining got you put on work assignments, or you lost the privilege of a 5-minute phone call. And she wants to remind everybody that this was billed as a treatment facility, not a prison or some kind of punishment. So what they do is they tailor the abuse that they dish out to exactly what kind of child you were. Her father left her when she was little. The counselors asked if I thought he left me because I was inadequate, if I believed he thought I was unintelligent, ugly, or fat. And none of these things had ever occurred to me before, but having them shouted at me in a therapy room full of other kids really turned me around on the whole not being terribly depressed thing. Like, she went in feeling okay, and they created this atmosphere so that she would become depressed because of what they were telling her.
And they create mental illness from this.
Right. It doesn't matter if you're a healthy kid when you walk in there. You spend a few hours deprived of sleep, food, and the ability to use the bathroom. When adults call you fat, you're going to walk out there with some kind of condition for sure. Some of the therapy that she used was subjected to was she had to dig out tree stumps alone. She used a shovel and a saw, and tree stumps are usually removed with the help of chains and sometimes even explosives. It's not a task for a teenage girl to take on.
No.
So she showed up in the summer, and now it's December in Montana, and it's freezing. And she's sitting out there every day trying to dig out a tree stump. She could go inside to sleep at night, but as soon as she woke up, she was out there again, and it took several weeks to get it out of the ground. So she makes this point. Spending $700 a day so your child can dig tree stumps out of the ground seems absurd, but apparently nothing says therapy like giving a depressed child some sharp objects and training in their use. So there's an example, at least one example in her case, of of a therapy that she
I mean,
was
it's
subjected to.
it's just unbelievable. I mean, like, how the fuck, like, and I think about this too, like, in Heritage, like, the kids who were in isolation and who were in isolation longer than a month, and at one point there was a good group of us who were down there all together for longer than a month, how are they still getting funding for keeping kids in isolation? Like, what the fuck is going on? You know, and how can they get funding for making a young girl dig out a tree stump?
It's incredible.
It's preposterous.
Well, I would imagine that either, in her case, the grandparents either didn't know or were convinced that, or were convinced by the professionals there that was indeed a viable form of therapy. Like, either one is kind of your answer, or somewhere in the middle there.
Or by that point in the winter, it doesn't matter. You know, the grandparents are now alone without any responsibility that they seem to have before, and they're happy as peaches there. So it doesn't matter, you know, to them that they're paying this money for their granddaughter to dig out a stump. You know? Right.
So we get to the final point, which is probably the most devastating, and it's that the brainwashing stays with you forever. And she goes on to say, the bullshit stays with you even once you leave the camp. Whenever I felt depressed, my grandparents would genuinely ask if I wanted to go back to Montana. I'm sure in their head something that expensive couldn't have been a bad experience, no matter how desperately I tried to convince them otherwise. It's we've talked about this before, it's the sunk cost fallacy as applied to child abuse. Basically, you spend tens of thousands of dollars treating your child or apparently treating your child, so how could it all just be crazy bullshit? So they went the other way, and every time she was accepted to college, received a scholarship, or won an award, my success was always directly attributed to the decision to send me to the camp. She goes on to say, I still find myself saying, intentions are irrelevant, mantra that I was taught in the program that a grand total of 0 people in the real world agree with. I was so terrified of being shipped away again that I didn't even touch alcohol until after I was 21. I still wake up from nightmares for being dragged out of my house and forced to board a plane. I kept a suitcase packed for a long time just in case. I also have this ridiculous coin he gave me, which translates from Latin to say, we demand greatness, not compliance. I'm sure you can read plenty of testimonials by parents who are completely happy with their brainwashed little minion who is now free from the horrors of metal music, homosexuality, or legitimate mental illness. Alternatively, you can also read reports that catalog the absurdity of get tough treatment programs with ramifications including post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as causing many teenagers' original problems to worsen. I never forgot that my story is not unique. Between 10,000 and 20,000 teens wind up in these programs every year, and they'll continue to do so because even in the 21st century, society is baffled by adolescence and will resort to desperate, horrific measures in hope of finding a cure. And this was basically a testimonial by a woman named Tori Jane. She's a writer and painter who lives in Los Angeles, and perhaps because she was willing to write this, maybe we can actually get her in person on the show to talk a little bit more about, her experiences in more detail or other things that she's learned in the last 5 years since this article was written. Yeah. But, to go off that point that the brainwashing, sticks with you, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I still struggle tremendously. I still struggle, I have horrendous anger problems, anger outbursts for no reason. And when I'm in it, I'm totally right, and I can't see the other side, and I can't step away. And that is 100% from attack therapy group. It's 100%. You know,
Right.
I think that when I first encountered attack therapy in Texas, it really shifted my way of thinking and my way of acting, particularly in the program. Like I had to completely give in during those sessions. You know, and those sessions went on sometimes for 3 hours. We'd just be stuck in these chairs, just going at each other, getting through goals and going at each other. And like, you know, I don't know how to sort of, you know, deal with my PTSD, because it's a tremendously isolatory diagnosis as well. What I have is the troubled teen industry diagnosis. You know, I went through it. I went through it for 4 years. And prior to that, I had post-traumatic stress disorder, you know? Mm-hmm. And so it was just a coupling of like this, so much trauma in so little time, or so much time, you know, as an adolescent, just going through it.
Right. It's not something that's easily reversed. I mean, it's such a intense and abusive situation that people tend not to be able to easily escape from what they've been through. It makes a lot of sense. And
yeah.
And, you know, because it's relatively private and mostly unknown by the general public, like still at this point, even most people really don't know what goes on, or they're not, they're just not in that economic bracket to even consider the idea of shipping their kid off, or, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's generally known. The people that do find out about this stuff are just across the board kind of like horrified and confused that this kind of thing is allowed to go on. But there's always this kind of loss. People find themselves at a loss for what to do about it, and part of the reason is because this industry is self-regulated. It just and in particular, we're talking about Montana. They have failed over and over and over again to beef up regulation of programs for so-called troubled teens over and over and over again. And Montana kind of parallels what's happening on a national level. That is kind of, people get concerned, Congress people get concerned. They find out what's going on. They write a bill and say this needs to change, and no one cares. Over and over and over again. In fact, the Stop Child Abuse in Residential Programs for Teens Act has been introduced in Congress every year since 2006 by one guy, a guy named George Miller from California, a representative from California, and then more recently by Adam Schiff of California, who reintroduced it in 2017 after the first guy retired. And it's never gotten farther than passage by the House in 2010, and then it died in committee in 2017. And so what this means is that there's a lack of federal oversight, and what that means is that there's no database of programs and no national tracking of abuse allegations and complaints. So every kid that dies, every abuse allegation that comes to light is handled very close to home. And even when people go to jail or face like severe consequences for abusing children, it all happens on the local level. So that person just gets removed. The obvious abuser and things just kind of continue as they were. In fact, in a lot of cases, the facilities use this stuff as further advertisement that they're doing things right because that problem has been eliminated. So now we're even better than we were before because we don't have that bad person on our staff who slipped through the cracks somehow.
Right.
Right. So there are these official sounding organizations like the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs, or natsap, and they absolutely have zero licensing powers. They're just dominated by people in the industry. It's kind of like fox guarding the hen house, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what's being pointed out as the reason to change laws. People are saying you need independent third-party regulation. My opinion is that these places should really just be shut down, and new models should be built that don't involve hardly any of the stuff that was documented by the girls' experience. Like, just like from the ground up, create real therapeutic environments for people. They're teams of people who seem to be suffering from things that they can't overcome. But, it seems to require a whole wiping away of all of this stuff and reassessing whether these kinds of facilities are needed in the first place. Like, we know situations where people have avoided shipping their kids away, and things have turned out pretty well,
Well, also, for there to be, an overhaul and from the ground up, rehaul of all of this, you need so much money to create individualized programs, with actual fucking, licensed people to do. I mean, what these troubled teen schools are selling is impossible for the price that the parents are paying. How about that?
Right.
And therefore, what happens is the kid is stuck with non-licensed staff for the majority of their time in program. And they barely ever see a licensed staff, or anyone.
Right. They don't even have, but that again is part of the problem. They don't require to have any kind of certification or license to be there. They can just call themselves whatever they want.
Yeah, but to have that kind of money, to have specialists come in and actually treat individualized, and have it done right, that's impossible. We don't have the money for that. No one does.
Oh, no. I mean, if it was something like
it
publicly funded?
Yeah, but if it was advertised, man. If it was,
right.
If it was as advertised, and your kid actually got to go to this happy place where they had individualized programs, and they saw individualized, licensed trained staff all day, and they were being re-taught how to live, and given a chance again, or just given therapy and a therapeutic environment to live in, so they're not in an abusive situation where they're understood.
Right.
I mean, all of that.
It would be way too expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be far more. I guess. See, and that's what I don't understand. I mean, these places are incredibly expensive as it is. So
yeah.
Then you wonder, okay, where's all that money going to? Who's getting paid? I don't. And
so
it's really hard to find out.
That's where I think these sort of natsap things come in. And I think you create another 501c3 that is based upon regulating, and that's where you launder your money. And everyone gets to dip into that pool.
Right. Right. There was the I forget the name of the facility where the executive director, it's in Montana, and I should know this, but I don't recall the name of the school. But I was looking at the financial records, and the executive director borrows $1 million a year from the nonprofit,
No,
fund.
that was Heritage, Marcus.
Yes, it
That
was.
was where I went in Utah. Yeah, and that's
Right.
part of natsap. That's part of natsap. And if you think there isn't laundering going on, you're absolutely out of your mind. This whole thing is a huge scam.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't care about children and you want to make a lot of money, open up a troubled teen facility.
Go
how
for it.
crazy is that? Because the kids are just seen as, I guess, big dollar signs.
Yeah.
Because, as we know, it doesn't take any real reason to have your child shipped away.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a legitimate reason. It doesn't have to be any reason. All that matters is that you can pay for it, and they will gladly come get your kid for you if you're willing to pay the bill.
And I mean, I'm seeing that with what's going on with this WASP group as well, because this WASP group is there's a WASP group that's, hold on, it's called WASP Fighters, Media and Press.
Now,
and
WASP is called, hold on, let's pause for a moment. WASP stands for Worldwide Association of Specialty Schools. WWASP. Program. Specialty program, yeah. Right, sorry. So that would be WASP, otherwise. So WASP, yes.
So basically, it starts out with this kind of seminar brainwashing guy who was part of this other core group that used to sort of go into corporations and help adults who were working for corporations to be more compliant to the corporations through going through these seminars. He decides to start up this place. And I think instantly kids just started pouring in. I don't think it takes much when you start this up. But
no, apparently there are a lot of parents who want to ship their kids off and who have the money to be able to afford it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. It's just baffling, the whole concept. Still, even though
one of the things that this group is trying to find out is the connection to WASP and U.S. Youth Service Red River Academy, Bethel Academy, Bell Academy, Terra Bella, California, Woodland Hills Maternity Home, Utah, which I think is a teen maternity home.
Okay.
Reality Trek, Utah, Pineview Christian Academy, and Skyview Christian Academy. And the connections between Mel Wassam and Robert Litchfield and Mel Sembler all connect back to when Aspen Education Group purchased Sea-Doo Inc.
Okay.
It's when you start adding in the wilderness programs that it is complicated with saws and Turnabout Ranch.
Is this related to that chart you sent to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, where it kind of shows the connections between different organizations and different facilities, and that's it is definitely a big web of defense against any outside influence that might want to change, and there's I guess there's a reason why this legislation that keeps being proposed keeps failing. It's because somebody's getting their pockets lined with all of this money that parents are paying to have their kids therapized, that is really just abuse. And so I guess that answers the question, where is this money going? It's going to politicians who do not want this system to be changed because it's making them wealthy.
Correct.
and getting them reelected so that they can later on retire and become lobbyists for the very organizations that they're supporting now.
Right.
Yeah. What a great gig. Like, I'm going to become a politician and accept money from these shady corporations that hurt kids, and then finish my term of office, and then go get right back into the so-called regulatory board that oversees this stuff, and does nothing except continue to get rich. It's it's pretty clear, and hopefully it's a glimmer of hope. But hopefully, even though these things don't seem to be getting a lot of traction, the more people talk about it, the more awareness is spread, the more people will begin to take notice and even be aware of what's going on. And parents, stop sending your kids to these places. There are other options.
There really are. I mean, this, you know, I just want to say how proud I am of all the survivors, because it's the survivors that are the ones who have dug the legacy of this and understand sort of how it's all connected. And it's only through the survivors that we know this.
Right. Right. I mean, that's why we started doing this series in the first place, because you shared with me what you went through, and we both decided that it would be beneficial for people to be able to tell what happened to them and you know, kind of get it off their chest, because in a lot of cases people are reluctant to talk about this stuff because people either don't understand, or it's so really scary, or they've been threatened by the very facilities they've left. There's a lot of that goes on, and so I'm really also very proud of all of the survivors, and you in particular for being willing to you know, to continue to do this. We seem to be gaining more people who are listening to what we're talking about on a daily basis, and you can see it in the comments that we receive. Like, there's some gratitude that's being expressed, and that's exactly what we're doing this for. That one person who never heard anyone tell the truth about these places, and finally has, and is saying thank you for getting the word out. And it's just, you know, there's only one person in the audience, and it's that survivor who's scared and doesn't know who to turn to. And sometimes the best option is to just tell your story, even if you don't want to use your name, even if you just want to say, this happened to me, and I finally found the courage to express it, and that's fantastic. Like, that's therapy, you know, being able to finally get it out.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how my life has changed, and the way I can talk about this is because I found groups of other survivors who were talking in a way that really made sense to me and was what I really wanted to say, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, so long.
Absolutely. And, you know, sometimes you come across, you know, disagreements within the groups, and you know, anger and resentment, and that's okay. And, you know, that's fine. Like, these people, because I've had my own experience, have been through a hell of a lot, and it's okay that we don't always get along. You know, that's fine. Yeah. Because we know what we've been through, and we know how these experiences continue to affect us. Yeah. So there is compassion and understanding even when things get rough, you know, amongst the group. So I bear no ill will towards anybody who has ever had a disagreement with the way that we disclose this stuff or talk about it or bring stuff into the light. because there are, I guess the best way to put it, there are actually, double agents out there who
Sure.
are appearing to be the receptive, nice, cooperative friend. And sometimes what we find is that it's another sales tactic. Thing to say that yes, there's some bad actors, but it's not all bad. And still, my mission, I guess if there's a mission that I really have, it's to find a good one. And so far, we haven't done that. And
right.
If there is a real therapeutic boarding school out there, contact us and let us know what you're doing differently, because you're getting a bad rap if you actually exist.
Right. Right.
Is there one?
No,
I don't think so. But if there
I have yet to find it. I have yet to find it. I've yet to find one that doesn't. I mean, because look, what I was trying to say about that connection where Wasp bought Aspen and then which was Sea-Doo, that is the stem of Synanon, and that is why these places use cult tactics.
Right.
And that is why these places are cults. And that is why none of them are any good. Because they're connected.
Synanon, for those who don't know, is the cult version of Alcoholics Anonymous. That sprung up, I guess, back in the 70s, and somebody decided, I forget the name of the person, it's not that important, but somebody decided that the real way to help people with problems was to force them into it and then attack them for their shortcomings and isolate them from the world. And then it got translated into, if we can do this with adults, how much easier would it be to do with children? Because they don't have any rights. So, and we can make money off of this stuff. So yeah, Synanon is a real key to how this all developed. And that led to
Straight Ink. That led to Straight Ink. And Aspen was already owned by Mitt Romney's company, or Bing. And then Wasp buys Aspen. And that's, I think, no, Aspen wasn't owned by Bain at that point. Aspen was owned by Sembler and Dietrich, who were part of Synanon and, or Sembler and someone else, I can't remember his name. Oh, Wasserman, who were part of Straight Ink, who that was who took from Synanon to Teens, and that's how it jumped to Teens.
Right. So, it sounds a lot like what happened with Elon, which is also something that people should take a listen to, because we have quite a few stories about that place. Yeah. And that seems to be popping up again as an example of what not to do as well. Again, we'll see if this kind of gains any traction. Elon has kind of come back into the public consciousness as the horrible place that it was, and I'm really glad that people are again talking about it, even though it closed down years ago. The influence of that place in particular is still widely felt around the country, around the world, in this so-called industry. A lot of the techniques that were kind of pioneered there are still being used, like the attack therapy stuff, isolation, being put out in the middle of nowhere so that escape is not really even viable, hiding people in the woods, so when people do run away, they get immediately caught, making people dress up in stupid outfits, wearing signs that say how stupid they are, dunce caps,
humiliation therapy.
Right. So yeah, I guess that's it. I think even though the Montana stuff is kind of sputtering a little bit at this point, at least there again is some attention being paid to the lack of regulation and the real abuses that are going on and the deaths that are going on with these children that are being legally kidnapped and imprisoned. Whew. Wow, it's always so emotional to talk about this stuff, even though
it's awful.
you never
it's
get
awful.
used to it. You know, you never
No,
really
I know.
get used to it
because it brings up my shit, and I know, but it helps me because at least I can talk about it. You know, it did happen. And for so long, I was told it didn't happen, and you know, the whole time I was in it, I didn't know why it was happening or the reasoning. You know, necessarily. So, you know, whatever. So I have to talk about it.
Yeah. So maybe one day, you know, in the not too distant future, we'll get on the podcast and talk about how things have changed, or that or suddenly like facilities are being shut down like a row of dominoes, you know, and or people are going to prison, or it really would be nice. So we'll keep at it, and this is an invitation for anybody to you know, to reach out to us in the comment section and let us know if you have any input or want to talk about this stuff. And I guess we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
thank you as always. It's
thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, we'll keep on trucking.
Yep.
All right. Take care.
All right, bud. Bye.